Being Black in America comes with its challenges. However, we understand that enlightenment through education is the oppressor's worst fear. By bridging the gap between academia and the people, our purpose is to equip you with knowledge that breaks down barriers during your journey towards truth and freedom. Welcome to the Black and Highly Dangerous Podcast.
Yo, Daph, what's up? How's your week been? What's been going on?
My week has been pretty chill. It was my first official week back to work after the big move. I didn't get everything done that I wanted to, but, it was a good transition back. And now I have a friend in town visiting me. We've had a good time enjoying restaurants, and we actually went to karaoke yesterday. But it was a safe karaoke space. It was socially distanced. I actually did not know that there were such things as karaoke rooms, to where it's just you and the people you come with in your own room singing karaoke.
Yeah, I was about to say, yeah, I was like, generally karaoke is pretty safe because of that. Because when I've been to karaoke, every time I've been to karaoke, it's been outside when it's like a bar or something like that. It's been those rooms. Actually, the first place I saw one of those was at Purdue. They had a place, a karaoke place that had opened up, and it was just like that, where we all were just in the one room. So that's good. That's definitely a good, pandemic-friendly activity.
Yeah. You know what? I think I remember that outing. I don't know if I was out of town. I definitely missed it. But yeah, that was my first time to a karaoke room. It was fun. I got to meet some people from my online writing group because they were in town. We were all vaxxed and we weren't masked inside the room, but these people were safe. So not promoting bad behavior, people, but it was fun. So try it out. I think folks should do that a little bit more because it's nice to get out the house.
Oh yeah, 100%. Definitely nice. You need to we need to be social. We're social creatures. We need to be social and get out and have fun and sing some songs with some friends. So I know that was good. I know that was a fun time. Karaoke is always fun, especially with friends.
Yeah. How have you been?
Week's been fine. Finishing up this week because now we're on fall break this week, which I'm excited about. So I'm pretty much off the whole week because Friday I'm leaving for a wedding, so I canceled my class on Friday. But on Monday and Tuesday classes are canceled, so pretty much free this week. So I am very excited about that. I just have one set of papers to grade that I'll probably grade, either today or tomorrow, so that way I can be really free and just relax and enjoy this week. I'm gonna take it in, just go to the gym, hang out, and not do much. But we also kind of sad because last night I had a little gathering as well with just my brother and one of my homies, and his girl and his baby, to watch the fight, the Deontay Wilder fight, Tyson Fury, and we're trying to pull again for our guy, Deontay Wilder. And we're once again saddened by the outcome. He lost. It was a much better fight than the last one, because the last one he got beaten like the second round, but this one he made it to about the 10th round, and it was a good fight, kind of like them fights you see off movies where both guys kept knocking each other down, and they just kept getting back up. And like, oh, okay, it's been a while since you've seen a fight like that. But once it got to about the 8th and 9th round, you could see Deontay was very tired, and it wasn't gonna last much longer, and that was the case. So, shout out to Deontay Wilder. This is the only guy that keeps beating him. He's beating everybody else he's faced. He's like 42-2-1, and the only time he lost is to Tyson Fury. So it was a good fight, though. It was a good fight. I wasn't disappointed that I watched it.
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying, don't scare me like that, because the way you started off with that, talking about some sad, I'm like, oh my God, is something tragic happening at the party? Like, what happened, Tyrell? Don't do that.
No, it was just tragic for the culture, Daph. It was just tragic for the culture.
Maybe next time.
Yeah, maybe next time. We'll see where he goes from there. But good fight, good heavyweight fight. It's good. It's been a while since we had some good heavyweight contenders. It's been years, so it's been good to see the heavyweight division picking back up. But okay, sounds good. Let's get into some Oh Lord news, and then we'll talk about today's special guest.
Okay, so our first story is dealing with something that you may have already figured out. We are dealing with supply chain issues, and you will increasingly, if you have not already done so, see empty shelves in stores like Walgreens, CVS, Dwayne Reed. I know I haven't been able to find anything at Target every time I go, but the supply chain issue. They noted that some of the ships have been waiting upwards of 4 weeks to be, let in. I think I went to the store yesterday. We barely found any paper towels. This is going to increasingly be an issue. They say that there's also an issue of people still stockpiling things. So yeah. Just, I guess make sure you have some essentials. Don't panic and do what we did in March. But Britain is experiencing the same issue, and it's partly because of COVID, but also because of Brexit, which shut them off from the rest of the EU.
Wow. Yeah, that's big. And it's important that you mentioned that. I mean, folks have been kind. I think when we talked about this before. I know Chris and I, we try to order things like furniture or other stuff, and it's been like, oh, okay, you'll get this in 4 months. Like, what you mean? What you mean 4 months? We was ordering cabinets and stuff like that over the summer, and now, but I see it's trickling down to more common household daily items as well. So yeah, that's something to keep in mind. Ever since the pandemic though started, and when we were like scavenging for toilet paper, me and Kristen learned that lesson. We're like, never again. So we are always fully stocked with napkins and toilet paper from Costco. So we got a whole bunch in the basement, but yeah, it's good to, for those of you going to the store, make sure if you see some, just, pick a little extra up. You never know what's about to happen. But yeah, these supply chain issues. And I know in some cases too, there's been strikes by delivery drivers, truck drivers, a shortage as well. I see Amazon doing a lot of things. I'm not sure if people have picked up on this, but even when I order now, they're like trying to push me to not do 2-day delivery. And make it be a little longer. And I forgot what the reasoning is about something. I think they're trying to say it's more environment friendly, which I'm sure it is. But like I get that notification a lot more now when I place my orders. And I feel like it's because of all what's going on to try to save face a little bit and not have the customers worry. I'm like, shoot, if y'all gonna be doing this, then y'all better lower that prime price.
Oh, absolutely. I have noticed that as well. Normal prime things are now taking like upwards of like 4 or 5 days. It's just crazy. There was something that I recently ordered. It was technically prime, but it's like, oh, you'll get it toward the end of October. And I'm just like, cool. I actually just got rid of my prime because I ain't got the student discount no more. So now I'm on John's family plan. He created me a little account because they allow you to do that. We were wasting money anyway by having 2 prime accounts in the same house. So.
Oh, yeah. That makes sense. Consolidate.
Okay, so for this next story, see what you think about this. A North Carolina high school is under fire because they suspended a handful of female athletes who participated in a student-led protest. What's shocking is why. The protest was because the district allowed a male athlete to play in a football game while facing a sexual assault allegation. Not only was he facing an allegation, he even had an ankle monitor. Now,
wow.
One issue, I guess, that the students had with the student playing is that if you get your cell phone taken in class, you're normally benched. So they were feeling like, wow, you have this major allegation, you have an ankle bracelet, and not only are you allowed to play. And the students who protested, they were punished. These were volleyball players, and they were punished with a 1-game suspension.
Wow. Wow. So the student who is accused of sexual assault is not suspended for a game, but yet the students who are protesting that decision are suspended for a game for practicing their First Amendment right. Yeah, that's wild. That's wild. That school definitely needs to get their priorities in order, because what kind of message are you sending to the youth? Both parties, yeah. And if you have an ankle bracelet, that's a pretty strong indication that, you should pause all activities because there's something going on. But clearly they care about those wins more than they care about their morals. And so now they're in the news for this, and I'm sure they're going to get a lot of backlash.
Yeah, I mean, football, I guess that football culture is just really, and of course these are just allegations, but it would seem to me that in the meantime, in the between time, you do something, especially I think for me, it's like the student having on an ankle bracelet, not at all that means that the student is guilty, but it's just kind of like, I don't know, something.
Yeah. Even the NFL, when stuff like that happens, they'll pause the person. Maybe they won't suspend them, but they're like, listen, you're going to have to, take a back seat until we get this cleared out and see what's going on.
To me,
get some resolution.
That makes sense. Okay, so we are always talking about the great state of California, and they are in the news again for some yes, Lord news, because, you already know what I'm about to say. They have become the first state to bring in compulsory ethnic studies for high school students, because Gavin Newsom noted that students should understand our full history.
Yeah, no, that was a really good one when I saw that. Shocking, not really shocking, but it's 2021, about to be 2022, and still, this is a first. The first state to do something like this, but it should be implemented everywhere. These kind of policies, and hopefully, this will set the trends on these other states practicing the same thing.
Absolutely, and just as a note, the requirement goes into effect for students who graduate in 2030, which is right around the corner. So, not students, currently in high school, but while in the midst of people fighting against books like what we mentioned last year, like the biography of like Rosa Parks, having a state really solidified the importance of knowing a full range of histories, because ethnic studies involves, African Americans, Mexican Americans, Chicano studies, and et cetera. So, shout out to California as always.
Are you going to report some of the other things he did?
Oh, you bring him on.
Oh, he's been on a tear, Daph. He's been on a tear. There's all this past week he signed this Momnibus bill. Have you heard about that? It's a bill that it's an act that will provide mothers with to postpartum health care, doula services, and more. He said he's trying to stop the Black maternal death rate. So he's giving women access to all of those wonderful services and state funded.
That's really awesome.
Yeah, he also ended mandatory minimum sentences for nonviolent drug offenses. Another big thing. He also becomes the first state to outlaw non-consensual condom removal.
Wow,
as well.
That's big. What do they actually call that? Sleuthing or something?
Yeah, stealthing.
Stealthing. Yeah, stealthing.
That's a big one. And then the final one I saw, outside of the one that you mentioned, is that California Governor Gavin Newsom also signs a bill requiring feminine products to be provided for free in schools and colleges.
Absolutely. I mean, that runs the gamut. Of like issues from, gender issues to issues of race and equity and criminal justice. Like, wow, he said, y'all tried to get me out of here, but y'all just didn't know. I was about to come with that hot fire.
Yeah, no, he's been killing it. I don't know. I guess to me, this looks like he was really mad about them trying to get him out of there. And he said, oh, y'all was mad before. Now y'all about to be real mad at me now. He's really digging deep with all these great policies. So, shout out to Newsom, man. I've even been seeing a lot of people on Twitter and people that I just follow, like, hey, this man runs for president. He got my vote. And that's something to pay attention to as well. Like, he's putting his money where his mouth is. So if he did make a presidential run, I think, folks will feel comfortable in supporting what he does because he's making these kind of moves. And if he can do this on a federal stage, that'll be some big stuff.
Absolutely.
I have a couple other ones that came up. Let me pull them up. One is that there was this interesting thing that happened with Sage Steele. You know who she is?
No.
She's an ESPN analyst, a Black woman, who's, one of the top anchors on ESPN. And she recently got ESPN really pulled off the air this past week following her controversial comments. Essentially, she was talking on a podcast, Jay Cutler's podcast, who's a former NFL quarterback, about her racial identity. And one, I didn't know she was even biracial. She was Black. So it was like, that was news to a lot of people as well. And I think she was talking about the census, and like people asked me, like, what do I put down on the census? And I'm like, what kind of question is this? Like, I put down both. And then she, for some reason, took it to Barack Obama and was like, I don't understand why he would just put Black down. And especially because his Black father wasn't around.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And clearly that was like a terrible, but she also talked about other things about how she didn't want to take the vaccine, but Disney was making their employees do so she had to, and was against like getting the vaccination and all this stuff. So it was like a lot of kind of controversial things she was mentioning, but it was that Obama comment that really upset a lot of folks in ESPN. And then she wound up also getting a positive test for COVID on top of that. And they're like, yeah, you know what? You need to chill out for a little bit. And they pulled her off air, and they're in conversation. So we see what's going to happen with that. I know Jamel Hill came out and spoke out against her and things like that as well. But, a lot of folks didn't, she kind of hinted towards some of her political views and stuff like that. And, a lot of people not feeling that. And so that was just kind of a big story in the sports world this week, because she's a pretty big anchor.
Wow. I'm looking at her. I wouldn't have even guessed it, Lord.
Yeah. It was, I didn't even know. Like I said, I watched Sage Steele for a few years and didn't even know she was biracial. So that's still just even an interesting take on her situation. Like, she was speaking as a matter of fact, like, yo, what do you mean? What would I check on the census? Like, yeah, we didn't know. That's why we asked you that question.
But it's just like, where did this come from all of a sudden? Like, I mean, it just seems to come from out of nowhere. If she's been on for a while and like going on about Barack Obama, like, baby, you've been out of office for so long. Why y'all still on it?
I don't know. I have no idea. But yeah, you're right. Another quick story that I saw had to do with this. I don't think we talked about this wedding photographer. You heard about this story?
Mm-mm.
So it was going viral on social media because a wedding photographer was denied food at the wedding, denied a plate, and then he deleted all the pictures and left the wedding.
Oh my goodness.
Oh my God.
Were they not paid?
So that's where, that was the big question. Like, should photographers or like people that help you be offered a plate, things like that? And of course, most people like, yes. But the catch-22 here is that this was a friend doing a friend a favor. And he only charged them $250 for 10 hours of work.
Wow. Unheard of.
Yes, for a wedding photographer. And he's like, professional. He does this. But he's like, yo, homie, $250, I guess basically to cover, whatever basic costs he does for editing and things like that. I'm not going to charge you more than that. And what was happening is like they were overworking him. They weren't giving him any breaks. He asked for like a bathroom break and they were like, no, you can't get a bathroom break. Like, you're on the clock. They were just being real like over the top with it. And so then he got hungry. Again, this is 10 hours. Actually, he said 12 hours. The contract was for 10, but they were working towards 12 hours. He got hungry. Like, can I get a plate? And they're like, no, you can't get no plate. You're on the clock, yada, yada, yada. He said, okay, deuces, deleted them pictures and bounced. And now they are without wedding photos because of that. So I thought that was an interesting story. I'm like, yo, first off, if this man is doing you a solid like that, $250, you better feed that man as much as he want.
Wow. Yeah. That is crazy to me that like 10 hours for a wedding photographer, that would be $5,000 plus, because I mean, most wedding photographers, you might have them for like 6 or something like that. I know although we had an elopement, we had a wedding photographer, and because it was a small thing, we had a small dinner. He sat at the table and ate with us after, he took some of the pictures. And I was like, why would you not? And this is your friend. Like, we knew our photographer through someone, so it was kind of a friend of a friend. But even if he wasn't like my friend, of course you're going to eat. You're doing me a solid. I guess they're not friends no more, though.
Oh, yeah, no, that's I'm not doing you this side. You're going to treat me like this. But yeah, so I know they pay the price. And sometimes it just pays to be a decent human being. And now y'all don't have all those memories are completely wiped away. So lesson learned. Treat those service workers right. And people say that in general in a lot of professions. And definitely if someone gives you that amazing discount for a wedding, that's pretty much damn near free. And for y'all to treat them like that, that's really inconsiderate.
Yeah.
And the final story, it was a lot of controversy as well. I don't know if you got to see Dave Chappelle's last stand-up there.
I did not see it, but I have seen some stories swirling around in terms of some of the content related to the LGBT community.
Yeah, he is called The Closer. It's his final contractual stand-up for Netflix. So even I watched it and he said he's not, doing any more stand-ups for a while. Because he's been pushing them out pretty frequently, almost once a year, if not a little bit more. And during this, he's been his past few, I guess his run of these Netflix documentaries has been really just taking a stab at cancel culture. Pretty much after every stand-up, the trans community has been protesting and upset. And this one, it seems like when they fight back, he fights back even more and digs deep. And so it's this fine line watching it. I'm like, oh yeah, this is, this stuff is not going to go over well. And this is fine line of Dave trying to, he says trying to protect the authenticity and integrity of comedy. Because folks are always trying to like tell comedians what doing, the past. I mean, if you look at comedians 20, 30 years ago, it's like a whole different ball game. But now, folks are more sensitive and politically correct, right? As they should be in a lot of ways. But Dave seems to push back on that. But one of the more inflammatory things that I know he said, he said gender is a fact. He stood by that. And he was saying that, his basis line of reasoning was that everyone enters this world through a woman. That's just a fact. And so he said gender is a fact. I'm like, as sociologists, we understand that gender is a social construct. And so that was one of the big things. And he said a lot of other things, but he also, critiqued some things because he was talking about how the trans community. Also, he had a friend that was a trans woman comedian that he was helping out, put her on. And because she opened up for a couple of his shows, the trans community started attacking her. And she wound up killing herself, taking her life because of the blowback she was getting from her own community because she was just opening up for Dave Chappelle. He was like, this kind of stuff can get serious. He's like, it don't affect me like that, but, everyone should be careful of like who you're attacking and why. Because just because she supported me now, someone from your community has lost their life. So, it was like, Chappelle, he's clever and intelligent in a lot of ways. And I can see I'm not a part of that community, so I'm not going to tell anybody if they shouldn't or should not be upset. But it was inflammatory in a lot of ways, and I can see the blowback. But he doesn't seem to care whatsoever.
Yeah, he has reached this point of not caring. And I don't know, that's kind of a fine line because I feel like a lot of us often get on the right when they're like going on and on about cancel culture. And we're like, no, it's just consequence culture. And so it's just like how, Dave Chappelle is, the culture, a part of the culture, but it's like, it's like, it's not like it's happening at everybody's expense. It's like he keeps focusing on the trans community, and it's just like it feels targeted. Because you know how comedians have always cracked on everyone. Now, I haven't seen it, so I don't know if he's cracking on everyone. But this seems to be a pattern where he wants to rile the trans community up, and it's just like leave people alone.
Yeah, it does seem like a pattern, something that's really bothering him. He talked about feminism as well. And And I mean, he made a good point with the feminism. I mean, he made a distinction we've talked about before, like a distinction between white feminists and black feminists and different issues and stuff. But yeah, I try to think of it as like, yeah, a lot of comedians talk about a lot of things, but if it was like a white comedian, somebody that's not part of like our community, right? Somebody that's not black and talking about black things and saying things that were disrespectful, yeah, we'd be upset. It's like that fine line where you have to, and he's talking about feminism, he's talking about women, he's talking about the trans community. These are things that communities that he's not a part of or isn't connected to very much. And so I think it comes off different when you're not a part of that group saying those things versus if somebody that's within that community saying certain things. So I think that's where the line gets crossed because he's not, he's not a woman, he's not trans, all these kind of things. So.
Yeah, yeah, that's true.
So it rubs in the wrong way, and I can definitely see that. Because and especially you say things on that platform, and I think the biggest fear is that he says things that I think because he's such a big name, and if he's putting these views out there with that much influence, I can see how it can be like very troubling for the trans community that's already dealing with a lot of violence and fear. And if he's like supporting things that are, not protective of that and can enhance those things, I think that's a very scary thing. So we'll see. But again, he's every time they want Netflix to take it down, like Netflix is not taking it down because he's caused controversy in every single one of these, and it just gives them more money, all the attention, even the backlash, puts more money in their pocket.
Yeah, well, we'll just see how this continues to evolve.
Yeah, we'll see. But if y'all haven't checked it out, you're interested, definitely check it out for yourself and come up with your own judgments as a result. But okay. That's all the stories I had. So talk about today's special guest, Professor Nikol Alexander-Floyd, who's a lawyer and a full professor of political science at Rutgers University, here to come talk to us about her most recent book, Reimagining Black Women, a critique of post-feminism and post-racial melodrama in culture and politics.
Yes, in addition to discussing her book, we generally just have a conversation about the unique challenges that Black women face in politics. We talk about some of her favorite Black women political figures from, historical and contemporary time. It was a good conversation, and I hope you enjoy.
Yes. So without further ado, let's get on Professor Alexander-Floyd, and we will catch up with y'all afterwards.
For today's episode, we welcome a very special guest, Dr. Nikol Alexander-Floyd, a lawyer and full professor of political science at Rutgers University, New Brunswick. During the conversation, we discuss her new book, Reimagining Black Women, which focuses on gender, race, and culture in politics. We also discuss her organization, the Association for the Study of Black Women in Politics, cancel culture, and the unique challenges Black women face in politics. Welcome, Dr. Alexander-Floyd.
Thank you so much for having me. Glad to be here.
Yes, glad to have you.
Very, very glad to have you. Before we really get into your research, and we'd like to know a little bit more just about who you are and like what sparked your interest in law and political science.
Well, I am from Louisiana, Lafayette, Louisiana. I often tell people that, I'm as deep fried and Southern as you can get. Actually, I went to Southern University as well. And I really am a first generation college student. And one of the beautiful things about that experience was that I had access to amazing mentors who helped me to understand that I could study the things that really meant a lot to me. I had no idea of what political science was before I began at Southern University. No idea that this could even be a life path that I'm on. But I was concerned about issues around race, inequality, and gender, and especially at the time around what was happening with the Reagan administration. I came of age during that era where people were really stigmatizing Black families, and especially female-headed single-parent households, Black women, young Black girls, people talking about babies, having babies, and just really that the stigma that went along with family welfare. All of those things really, really kind of framed, my understanding of a lot of things, including political life. So I really wanted to study this, and I really wanted to study especially how I could see people like Reagan and his ilk saying certain things about Black people and Black families basically destroying the nation, and the same kinds of things being said in slightly different ways, but still substantively the same by people like Jawanza Kujufu or Louis Farrakhan. And so I found a way to study that. And that's how I began my journey of studying law and of studying politics. And it's it's been an incredible opportunity. I praise God for it. My first major work dealt with Black nationalism and white nationalism, and how the gender politics of both of those basically overlap, and to talk specifically about white nationalism as it aligns with the state, not the tiki torch carrying type of white nationalists that more people are more familiar with, or at least more comfortable with talking about, but political scientists in particular have for decades been thinking about the connection between white nationalism and the state, centered in Republican Party politics especially. And that's really, something that started me on my journey of thinking about things. And gender often forms the really the core overlap of what people are operating with, but at the same time miss. Especially in Black politics, I think that it's a blind spot that people are able to see opposition, racist opposition in terms of education, affirmative action, certain things that we deem to be quote unquote racialized, but issues around the family, around gender, that is a blind spot. So the kind of ideological support for certain types of patriarchy becomes a severe limitation to our seeking the best kind of political results that we can, when we have shifted our attention. And this actually connects to and please stop me if I'm talking too much and you have other questions, but the connection between that and this current book project really connects with how we shifted from talking about macro structural or big issues around changing society. Now, we were talking about revolution. We were talking about in mid 20th century Black politics, talking about change that would actually turn the nation upside down as we know it. But the kind of pushback to that really centered on taking our eyes off of that big picture and looking at the micro institution of the family, and basically blaming poor people in general and Black people in particular for creating our own problems, so that the so-called breakdown of the Black family became a kind of organizing principle to explain any kind of challenge that Black people may have, whether it be drugs, poverty itself, crime, etc. We took our eyes off of thinking about the ways in which these things are tied to institutional processes in this country and public policy priorities, and instead essentially blaming the victim. And so, in a nutshell, that's part of what I've participated in trying to study as a scholar, where my heart is in thinking through those things that actually obstruct our efforts to make a better life for people in this country. And this work in particular, it's taken over a decade to produce. It started off as an article in my mind, something I wanted to get out my system, some things that were kind of irritating me as a professor. I was doing my hardest to try to teach about class politics and racism, and actually teaching in a Black Studies department at the time, and having an opportunity to have students from a variety of different types of backgrounds, class backgrounds and racial backgrounds, gender backgrounds, et cetera. And some of the stuff that they were watching on TV, like Grey's Anatomy, as one example, Crash, those are just some of the examples of some of the things at the time that really stood out. They were undermining my work in the classroom, because although students could, get the kind of major concepts around, racism and white privilege, these other things, when they watch something like Grey's Anatomy, which somehow is still on television, I call it the success of neoliberalism. I have no other way to explain it. But, they looked at a kind of superficial representation of diversity. Right? Young people got excited about just seeing images of women in surgery or people of color being represented on that show. And they took it to mean something in terms of substantive equality, in terms of what it represented. So it really pushed me to grapple with the ways in which those kind of ideological messages were being transmitted, and what it meant. And it's been quite a journey, but it's something that has helped me to understand what's in this moment that we're dealing with. That we are in a situation where there's both a doing and undoing of feminism, as Angela McRobbie might say, and a doing and undoing of a lot of types of things. Right? On the one hand, you will have a certain way that people may be discussing things in ways that sound like they're progressive. But on the other hand, it's actually something that we can see in terms of appropriation actually happening, that people are taking concepts, they're taking ideas, they're taking history and basically misappropriating it and trying to use it for their own political ends. So we have, along a continuum, a set of fantasies, ideologies, and frameworks that are being deployed or used to counteract social justice efforts. Some of them are very direct and more familiar to us in terms of people being very obviously racist, sexist, and aggressive. Others are much more subtle. And so my hope in writing this book was to help people to understand the history behind what we're seeing in terms of the variety of different ways that people, are thinking about or not thinking about issues about racism and sexism and class inequality, and to help people, give people tools to understand what's happening in this moment, and to give them some examples. I feel like I've been talking a whole lot, so I want to stop and ask if you have any.
No, it was good. It was really good. We appreciate that. For our listeners, the book that she's been referencing is her book, Reimagining Black Women: A Critique of Post-Feminist and Post-Racial Melodrama in Culture and Politics, which recently came out this year. So some of the questions we have are surrounding this book. And, one of the questions, I know you've addressed this in the book. Maybe you can give us, our listeners, a couple of examples of what you describe in the book. But what are some of the narratives surrounding Black women in politics when it comes to things that you've already mentioned?
Okay. Well, one of the things that I look at, are the ways in which, I take a very unlikely character, Condoleezza Rice, as a subject of one of my chapters. And I did that on purpose because we don't like to talk about certain things at times in Black politics, and Black conservative figures, are some of those things we don't like to talk about. And I wanted to talk about her in particular because of the unique kind of space that she has in U.S. political history, being, the National Security Advisor and then Secretary of State, but showing how even someone like Condoleezza Rice, who buys into and helps to market this idea of integrationism as an ideal, and this idea of racial overcoming, all the things that we associate with mainline Republican or conservative dogma. You work hard enough. This is a meritocracy. You can overcome any obstacle, including racism. Rice grows up, in Birmingham, Alabama. She actually knew the 4 girls who were killed, and the bombing uses all of that history and that imagery to really show that, hey, you can do anything in this country. Racism and sexism, or she's a super minority figure. In the book, I deal with basically how people frame not just Black people, but especially Black people in public discourse as what I call liminal subjects. And basically, people who are betwixt and between polar opposites. You're either seen as a super minority, somebody who turns every stereotype on its head in the extreme. Like a Condoleezza Rice, who wakes up at 4 o'clock, exercises. She's tries to be exceptional in everything that she does. Or on the other hand, Black people being constructed and framed as outsiders, as abject, as others, as people who because of who we are and our behavior are outside of, or should be placed outside of, our public concern. So even a Condoleezza Rice, to land this plane, has to deal with the reality of racism and sexism in terms of how she was received and understood. And so I look at all the ways in which she was actually framed as a hypersexual Jezebel, how people on the left and the right, when they could critiqued her, really marshaled these ideas about Black women being mammies, all these really racist and sexist and stereotypical ideas, symbols, and imagery to critique her. And so part of what I show is that, there's a way in which, yes, even her presence, in that arena is something that is resisted. But, I do, it's a complicated and tricky thing, right? Because I realized that as I was talking about this, no matter how much I said, I'm not trying to redeem Condoleezza Rice as a political figure. Somehow, whenever people understood that she was being characterized or addressed in racist or sexist ways, somehow the kind of identification in that experience would then cause people to, magically think of her in a completely different way. And, the psychoanalysis that I turned to for this project really helped me to understand the ways in which those kinds of things can happen, how it is that we can sometimes unconsciously make those kinds of connections and have those kinds of, mental operations happen. And I guess I want to give us an opportunity to step back and think about when that kind of uncritical kind of identification is happening, because Condoleezza Rice is still a very conservative, dangerous figure, and one who is, by most accounts, a war criminal, and someone who arguably acts without conscience in terms of the execution of some of the things that she has done in public life. And I make no make no effort to cast that aside. That is very real. Part of what I want to highlight, though, is that this notion that somehow we're in this fantasy of being post-race and racism and post-sexism, that's that's something that we can't deal with. But beyond that, people at this point may say, well, of course, I mean, we're far past that point. Well, yes and no. See, because of the rhetoric that we've come to be exposed to in movies, in film, in public discourse, and now even on social media, some people really bought into these ideas that somehow things were different, materially different. And we need to look at people like Condoleezza Rice, or public figures, and really understand what's rhetoric and what's reality, and to look at the substance of things. So one of the things that I highlight is that, getting people in office, right? The kind of politics of optics is something that we have got to get beyond. It is important to mark the kind of overcoming of barriers, but that can't be the limit of politics. We have to understand, what are people about? What are they about in terms of their priorities? How do they see the world? Are they consistent in how they present themselves, what they're able to pursue? Where are they ideologically? Because not everybody who you can identify as being in some particular type of affinity group is going to see things the same way that you are going to see things. And so, that old phrasing, all skin folk and kinfolk, is one of the things that I've used sometimes to try to talk to people. Of course, the reality is that there is diversity among people, even within what we would think of as racial communities, Black communities. And that has to be something that we can understand and embrace. We can't know who someone is politically and how they will operate simply by knowing how it is that they identify. And that's one of the key takeaways that I really try to get to in this book. I also talk about President Barack Obama, in that kind of connection. Because if your families are like mine, and just as an example, sometimes people treat President Obama like he's another family member. That he's the kind of pride that people had in the achievement of having the first person who's of African descent be president is something that many people marked. As a political scientist, and as someone who's concerned about having progressive social and political change in this country, I am really adamant about our being positioned to hold people accountable, to really live out the goals of the best of the social movements that we have had in this country, particularly from the mid 20th century on. We have to understand things in a very complicated way, and to understand how people are operating. I critique President Obama in the ways in which he affirms, the kind of focus on Black culture pathology. The way that I really kind of focus in on the ways in which he castigates Black people in many of the same ways that we've seen over time. And My Brother's Keepers initiative, which one person I think accurately called his Obama 2.0 plan, what he wanted to put into place to situate his public life after leaving office, as a serious problem. And as really a slap in the face to the goals of the civil rights movement, not simply to have people in office, but to have people positioned to make change. And so it represents the exact opposite of what the best of elected office should represent, that people can actually make demands on the state. that we can have public policy that addresses people's needs. Even something simple like the additional monies that folk are getting across the country recently because of the pandemic. That's the kind of thing that actually is making a difference in people's lives. Now, it's not marked as something that is designed for communities of color in particular. It's benefiting people in general in the country and lifting people out of poverty. At least in the current context, making things better, but it's disproportionately benefiting Latinx and Black people because we are disproportionately suffering in terms of issues of poverty. Public policy and having an opportunity to develop public policy that supports the public good has to be part of our agenda. Part of what President Obama represents and part of what he's doing that is deeply problematic is to actually turn our focus back to the private sector, to businesses, to think tanks, to try to generate support for a different way of thinking about the family, ideas about responsibility, being your brother's keeper, and really falling into the trap of the legacy of the Moynihan Report, thinking about blaming Black people for our own problems, thinking about things on a micro level and not asking those bigger questions. And it's hard to make those kinds of arguments at times because people look at a figure like President Obama and they think, well, but, look at how he's been attacked as somebody who is an outsider, as someone who is seen as a body out of place or somebody who's a space invader, as Nirmal Puar might argue in some of her work. We see him being attacked in racist ways. We see the production of the Tea Party that's in part responding to his presence. That people can critique that and at the same time hold political figures like President Obama accountable. So one of the key things that I really try to focus on in this work is that very dynamic, that we can and should call out racism and sexism and the types of ways that people in public office and public life are handled in ways that are deeply problematic, and at the same time hold people accountable in terms of the responsibilities that they have as elected officials, the responsibilities that they have to the communities and constituencies that they claim to care about and work for. So that's a big, a big kind of takeaway and point that I really wanted to explore in this work.
Yeah. So on that point, I've been formulating this question in my head while you were talking because, thinking about like the complexities of Condoleezza Rice's identity, from her political identity to her gender identity, racial identity, Barack Obama, and just thinking like in politics and more broadly, do you feel like there is more space for Black men in politics to have these complicated identities and potentially contradictory in terms of like their politics and identity versus like women? So I think about, not just Condoleezza Rice, but I think about Omarosa, thinking about the pop culture example. I think about Chrisette Michele versus like Kanye West. And like, do you think that there's more space for contradiction for like Black men in politics versus Black women?
Absolutely. I think that's an important and astute observation. I think that part of what comes to the fore is that there is a kind of, I want to say unspoken assumption. Sometimes it's absolutely spoken, right, in terms of there being a priority and place and rightness, a legitimacy that we associate with male leadership. In the home, in mosques, in churches, in organizations. So when we have assumptions about about gender, about manhood, womanhood, the parameters around what constitutes gender and what a man and woman ought to be and do, even within kind of patriarchal assumptions in the private space, those come to define what happens in other arenas. And so one of the things I talk about in my book is that very thing, right? There's and people like President Obama and Bill Cosby in a previous era, right? How they fashioned themselves as kind of symbolic fathers, right, for the Black nation, if you will. That there were people who were seen and positioned themselves as representing a kind of idealized notion of what it meant to be a man, to actually affirm certain types of stereotypical patriarchal notions about manhood and about family, among other things. And so people definitely have, they see Black men as having a certain type of place and authority. There's a different level of protectionism that happens. There's a way in which, again, that politics of identification operates, so that when there's a perception that people are being attacked, it's something that really mobilizes support and shuts out critics. And so we see that over and over and over again. There's definitely a lot, a greater bandwidth that people will give to political figures to make mistakes, to have scripts about recovery and redemption. And we could think of so many of those. Marion Barry comes to mind, of course. He went on to have a political career, even after, what happened with, the sting and Rashida Moore. We can look at what's happening with R. Kelly. It took decades to get to the verdict that has recently come to pass. It took decades. It took documentaries. It took people, groups working over time for decades. And we saw over and over again ideas about Black male protectionism, and not just coming from Black men, but also from Black women, right? People basically dismissing what the kind of predatory behavior that he openly talked about, in my view, in his work. And still, even after all that has come painfully to light, folks are taken to social media and really still questioning, right? We see discussions about, but what about this person who is a bad actor? When are we going to pay attention to them? Or, those kinds of comments really tell us that for some people, holding people accountable for their actions really is something that is difficult to do. So it's a protracted struggle to bring those kinds of things to light. But I think a big part of it is naming those dynamics, of calling them out, of exploring them and continuing to push back and continuing to hold the line, and to see in these moments opportunities to educate, to plant and water seeds, and to help people to see things in a different way. We are in denial about many things, including the ways in which child sexual abuse is really something that is epidemic, right? Many young people, girls and boys, experience sexual violation, molestation, and they never talk about it. It never gets exposed. And we go into denial about this. And what something like what's happening with R. Kelly really highlights, it should highlight for us, sadly, that this is not something that is exceptional. It should really help us to understand the prevalence of it. And people also point out, of course, that he was a victim himself. And that is something I think should be part of our understanding. It not by way of excusing anything that he has done. Many people suffer as survivors of child sexual abuse, and they don't go on to be abusers themselves. But we have to really be proactive in telling the truth as we know it to be, and not participating in other people's fictions. And that's a tough thing, because what it will mean is that some relationships cannot be maintained. Some churches might not, be able to keep the kind of glossy image that they put out to the world. Different organizations, et cetera, we'll see changes. We're seeing some representations of what that's happening, what that looks like when it happens in this Me Too moment. But really, it's only the tip of the iceberg. It really points to an expansive and unfortunately very common set of issues that people are grappling with. And I think that your observation is spot on, that there is a greater level of latitude that that Black men can have in how they move in the world socially and politically.
Thank you for that. This has been a good conversation about the book, and we want to make sure we'll kind of stop the conversation about the book for now, because we want our listeners to go ahead and get it for themselves and read and purchase the book and read about it more. And we had a couple other questions, non-related to the book, but we definitely wanted to ask you about, because we feel it's definitely pertinent and important to the work that you do and the contributions you make to the field. And we saw that you're also a co-founder of the Association for the Study of Black Women in Politics. So can you tell us a little bit about that, the mission of the organization, and why you felt it was necessary to start that?
Yes, thank you so much for that. It was something that was created by myself and another political scientist, Rose Harris. And basically, we both study Black women in politics. And we were having a conversation one day and talking about how, just issues in the discipline in the field, and say, we need something like the Association of Black Women Historians. And, Brunswick said that and said, I was thinking the same thing. And so we said, okay, we should do it. And it's like, okay, let's do it. All right. But the naming of it is a bit different. It's the Association for the Study of Black Women in Politics, because part of what we realized was that two things, and I'll just say that the organization has two priorities. One is promoting the professionalization and career opportunities for scholars who study Black women as political actors, particularly in political science, and to support and advance the study of Black women as political actors, and to do it in a way that's radical, to do it in a way that pushes against some of the mainstream ways that people may focus on Black women in politics, to make space for doing a certain type of work. So we were concerned first of all, to support people, just Black women political scientists in general, whether they study Black women as political actors or not, but also to make space to do a different type of work, and to do radical work, not just scholarship, but scholarship focused on social justice, and that was open to a wide variety of ways of studying, not just quantitative methodology, although that's certainly something that people do, and that has a place, but to make space for people to produce knowledge about Black women as political actors in elected politics, absolutely, and also how people are changing communities on the ground, how people are making political moves in terms of the labor movement, in terms of social movement organizing, the fight to expose what's happening with HIV and AIDS. I mean, to really take a broad, a kind of a more expansive look at what constitutes political activity in the lives of Black people. And so that was the purpose of the organization. Myself and Nadia Brown were tasked by the president of the National Conference of Black Political Scientists at the time, Wendy Smoothe, to put together Black Women's Initiative with the National Conference of Black Political Scientists. And we got other like-minded individuals together and formalized the relationship between the National Conference of Black Political Scientists, which is in its 53rd year of work. And so we meet in conjunction with that organization that's meant the world to myself and a lot of other specialists in Black politics. And we have sessions that highlight Black women in politics and Black gender politics, and sessions work pre-conference activity and activity during the conference that actually supports just the professional development of Black political scientists or members of both organizations in general. So it's been a real blessing to be a part of this effort with so many amazing people. We have awards that we give each year for work on Black women in politics. Best paper awards, awards for books, presentations that people make on Black women as political actors. And it has been a beautiful and amazing thing to see more people coming into this work and making space to do this work. And right now, people are talking about Black women in politics, as if it's some kind of, new development. And it's not, right? We have been a part of this U.S. experiment all along, and we have in many ways contributed to the development of this democracy in pushing this nation to fulfill the promise of democracy that we can and try to identify with this political experiment that we call the United States of America.
Well, along those lines, I guess, it's a good time to ask, who are some of your favorite Black women political figures? It could be contemporary or historical.
I like many people. I love Ida B. Wells. I love Ida B. Wells. In no small part because because she's fierce, because she had the guts and the intellect and acumen to really study and advocate for change in the world, and she did it at such great risk to herself. But she was committed. She was committed, and she models for us, I believe, the type of certainty that we have to have about living our lives in a way that will make a change for people now and also in the future. So she I think is one of my favorites. I actually also and I may write something about Cynthia Mckinney, in part because she's an interesting political figure. People forget that she ran for president in the same presidential cycle as President Obama and Hillary Clinton, and she's barely a footnote when we discuss those things. But to think about people who are involved in third-party politics, who are really coming up with a seriously radical kind of agenda is important. And to think about Claudia Jones is another, I think, amazing and dynamic figure that is getting more attention in no small part because of the work of Carol Boyce Davies. Left of Karl Marx is a really great investigation of this Black feminist communist and how her work really just explodes our understanding of feminism. Some people, when I've taught this book in classes, they are amazed. They didn't even know Black communists existed, but that Black people were and are a part of thinking about, serious political change in terms of dealing with class politics. The kind of way in which she was really a global figure, moving between the Caribbean and Britain and the U.S. and the kind of political activities that she was involved in. So that's there are many figures that I think we just need to know more about. But those are some of the standouts in my mind that become that are inspirational, and that I think that people can really benefit from thinking about a bit more deeply.
Thanks for sharing that. Our last question we have for you, because of your accomplished career, what advice would you give to young Black women who want to break into law, political science, or politics? What would you say are some of the things they should know that would help them moving forward?
Okay. My mother gave me the best advice that I had. Going to college, she told me to stay close to God. At the time, I don't know that really settled, in me, but for me, that has been important, that I have not lost the understanding of my faith as a Christian that my parents instilled in me. And beyond that, to know that every life has purpose, and to not compromise who they are to attain any degree or any accomplishment. That at the end of the day, to maintain one's integrity, to strive to do that is critical, because these institutions, if allowed, will transform who you are and make you over into the image that they want to make you into. And it can deform the very gifts and beauty that you were meant to share in the world. So to maintain your integrity and not to lose yourself, and to stay focused on the things that keep you up at night, the things that you're most concerned about, and that things may be rough, but that you can make it. And there's a deposit, I believe, that we all have to make in this earth while we are here, to benefit other people and future generations. The gifts that we have, they don't belong to us. They belong to each other. We need each other. So I think those things are central.
Thank you for that. I know someone really needed to hear it, so thank you. So how can people find out more about you, connect with you, whether it be social media?
Okay, I'm still working on trying to do work on Twitter and all these other places and social media. I am on social media and I enjoy connecting with people. On Twitter, I'm just at N Alexander-Floyd. On Instagram, I'm the real Nikol Alexander-Floyd. Because I got hacked, that's the only reason I came up with that handle. And it was so crazy because they actually copied that too. So it was just a hot mess.
But that's strange.
It
wow.
was very strange. They were like the real Nikol Alexander-Floyd. I'm like, who am I? I mean, why are people trying to hack my little account? But the real Nikol Alexander-Floyd, at N Alexander-Floyd on Twitter. But also my website, NicoleAlexanderFloyd.com. And so we'd love to hear from people and love to connect with people. And if I don't get back to an email right away, just send me another one. Send me another one. Life gets complicated sometimes, but I love to be in touch with people.
Well, wonderful. Thank you for that information. We'll be sure to post those links and information to our description of this podcast. So for our listeners, make sure you check that out. But we thank you for taking the time to come chat with us, explore and discuss your book, discuss organizations you're a part of, and just also giving that advice at the end to folks who are looking to, go a similar path as you. I think that stuff is necessary. And I think, you laid out some good things, some good gems for them to take and move forward. So we appreciate that. We appreciate all that you do.
Well, Tyrell and Daphne, I appreciate you. I appreciate your listeners. And it has been wonderful to just be together and have this conversation. So thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Yo, Dad, so what do you think about Dr. Nikol Alexander-Floyd coming to talk to us about, all the wonderful work she's doing in her book, Reimagining Black Women?
Yeah, this was a very, very informative interview. Dr. Alexander-Floyd is very clearly passionate about the topic, and I think passionate about the success of Black women in politics, political science, and law. I think that really came through in the interview.
Oh, yeah, 100%. She's been doing this for a while. It was cool to hear kind of the origin story of when she began to think about this kind of stuff and the politics in the 80s, and the imagery and the way Black women, Black people in the Black family was being attacked, but particularly Black women in so many different spaces. And so how that, especially with a lot of people of color and Black folks in particular, how a lot of those things, the times we live in, inspires a lot of what we do academically and even just, entrepreneurship, all that kind of stuff. So it's cool to kind of hear those things saying, hey, that time period was an important time period to explore these kind of things and moving that conversation forward to making sure that, Black women, we understand how Black women were being observed and critiqued, but also how we can move past that and view it in a more equitable fashion.
Yeah, agreed. The other thing, so when we were preparing for the interview, I, kept seeing like associate professor, but it looks like one of the things that I figured out right before is that she was actually promoted to full professor, which is a really big deal for our listeners. The number of full Black professors is so small. And then you think about full Black women professors is even smaller. And so the fact that, she's created organizations such as the Association for the Study of Black Women in Politics is, bringing other scholars along. I think that's an important mission. But beyond that, the actual scholarship is just awesome and rigorous. I personally really enjoyed, probably because I asked it, but the question about the ways in which, gender kind of play into the ways that we view political figures, politics. So thinking about intersectionality.
Yeah, for sure. No doubt. That was a really good question. And I like the gems you drop at the end, kind of just giving advice and, one of the key things, remaining true to yourself. I think that's important. A lot of times is, just really is, Black people in many white spaces, sometimes we feel uncomfortable at being our true selves and, keeping that in the back of your mind, like be yourself. Of course, there's certain things we have to navigate, but don't lose yourself in the process. And then you'll just probably feel way better at the end when you accomplish what you want to, knowing that you did it, being true to yourself. So I thought that was a really good gem dropped, and, folks should take that seriously wherever they're in their lives, trying to move forward and accomplish all their goals. So I appreciate that. But yeah, make sure you all click the links in the description, follow her, contact her if you're interested in the work she's doing. Then after you do that, be sure to follow us on social media at BHD Podcast is our social media handle. We're on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Also visit our website, blackandhighlydangerous.com, to keep up with all our latest content. You can email us, bhdpodcast@gmail.com. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, ideas of guests, or you just want to say, hey, we always appreciate that. And after you want to do that, you can go ahead and review and rate us on iTunes. That really helps us out with the algorithm so that more people can find us. So please, if you like what we do here, go ahead on iTunes, leave a review, leave a rating, and we really appreciate that. And after you leave that rating, please give us a share. Share us with your friends, share us with your family, share us with your enemies, and as always, continue to be the oppressor's worst fear.
If you're interested in continuing this and other conversations, visit our website, blackandhighlydangerous.com, to subscribe to our email list, suggest topics, and participate in our discussion forums.
Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at BHD Podcast. And please don't forget to subscribe and rate our podcast on your favorite platform. And as always, continue to be the oppressor's worst fear.